Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome to the school committee meeting of Monday, October 21st, 2019. This is your notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. We're going to start tonight with some recognitions of some of our students, and for that I'll turn it over to the superintendent, Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Chairman Withers. This time I'd like to invite up Jenna Gittle and Nathaniel Fisante, Emily Gittle, and Eric Yip. Give you a couple of chairs. Thank you, Mr. So, as a result of being part of a couple of organizations, in this case NESDEC and the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, Attleboro has the ability to award seniors and based on the size of the district, so we get 2 awards for a district of this size. So every year, I ask the high school to help me out, and I should extend my thanks to Ms. Hickox and her team. They always do a very nice job of finding the kind of students that we would like to honor in moments such as this. As always, she found some excellent students to bring to my attention. I have to say that these students aren't just academic stars, which they are, but they're accomplished and articulate students who represent the district very well, and it was a real pleasure to spend some time with them last week, to get to know them a little bit. They're also representative in that they attended 6 of our schools, and so they've had quite a range of experiences that they could draw from as we talked about their experience. I was very pleased to hear them speak favorably about the district, to talk about their experiences, and they really went at great lengths to discuss the teachers and the difference the teachers in the district have made in their own experiences, the relationships that they have with those teachers. And they also talked at great length about the opportunities that the Attleboro Public Schools have provided for them. So it was nice to hear that the work that we do in trying to create those kinds of outcomes for students was indicative of the experience that they've had. We had a very nice conversation. We discussed a lot of things, including their hopes for the future, and also their fears. I was interested to hear them talk about their fear of failure and of the future itself. At this time of their academic careers, the future looms large in their thinking, and it's nice to hear that that hasn't changed at all. But we did talk about how life has changed through social media and other social forces that I think do put extra pressures on students that I know I didn't face as a teenager, and that the impact that has on their lives. And then we wrapped up the discussion. As the committee might know, I now have a freshman at Attleboro High School, and I asked for some advice on what they did and how I could perhaps steal a little of their success from my family. They had some good advice for us. Ask for help, again, form those relationships, and then engage in positivity, do those little extra things to make the world a better place. So sage advice from our students. At this time, I'll turn it over to see if any of them would like to comment. Maybe not.
I guess I'll say thank you for everything that the Attleboro Public School System has done to help achieve not only ours but the success of a lot of other students in this district. What you guys do isn't underappreciated. I recognize how hard you work to make the school community a better place, and I've surely seen that in my experiences here. So just thank you guys for the recognition. Thank you for what you do. I really appreciate it, and I believe I speak for other people when I say this as well.
Yes, you guys are incredible. Thank you so much.
My experience at Attleboro High School has been extremely positive, and going through school systems in Attleboro, it's been a pleasure. The teachers have all helped me and helped others. They're extremely, they're motivated, they're great people. They always put their students and learning first, and I have all good things to say. Thank you so much for everything you've done for us.
Any comments from the committee?
Hopes for the future? What are you looking to do maybe after you graduate?
So I personally want to go into computer science, computer programming. We talked a little bit about this during our meeting last week, where computer science is an interesting field because even if you don't want to specialize specifically in computer science or computer programming, it's a very good skill to look towards in the future, especially as like maybe an extra skill, because with so many different majors and just fields of study, there's a lot that involves both computer science and whatever field you're trying to go into. So that's like one of the big things towards the future. I'm hoping that my interest in computer science, as well as like, just the way the future's heading, will hopefully look bright for, computer science, computer programming, things like that.
I share a similar interest with my sister. I want to be a research scientist. In what field, I'm not sure, but I especially am drawn to biology. I like kind of the origins of life, how and why we are is a very intriguing concept that I'd like to explore. And if I can contribute some new and original body of knowledge to the scientific community and to the world that can advance us as a society, I would have done my part here, and I'd be proud of it. Yep, adding on to what she said, we have very similar interests, very similar paths of what we want to do. I think that working in a research environment would be very beneficial, to work with a team of like-minded, very driven, motivated, passionate people who just want to discover and explore. I love just learning, I love learning more about our world. I love learning, what drives discovery and what drives life, like Jenna has mentioned. I think that the route to discovery and, pursuing that in the field of science would help me further expand my knowledge, further expand, just what I know, and keep on helping me grow into a better person and try and truly understand what's going on around me.
I hope to. I plan on going to college in the field of environmental science. I want to do work in species conservation, ecosystem conservation, working to help preserve our natural world and the species of animals, plants, fungi, whatever that inhabit it, which is a very necessary thing, I feel, in this day and age, that preserving the environment and keeping our planet around long enough for our children and grandchildren to enjoy it is something that's really important these days, and I really want to be helping with that progress to kind of reverse the issues that humans have inflicted on the planet.
Very impressive.
Mr. Quinn?
I think sometimes adults in a sort of egotistical way talk about preparing the youth for the future. And if this panel has illustrated anything, it's that they are totally ready to write it themselves. And that it's our job to support you in figuring out how you want to be computer scientists or some offshoot of it, research scientists or environmental scientists. And I'm grateful to the teachers who helped support that along the way. But I also think it's a really important reminder that our kids know what they want to do and know how to write the future. So it's less about preparing you rather than supporting you. So go do it. And don't be afraid to change your mind. And I look forward to seeing whatever happens next.
Mr. Storrs?
As much as academics are important, I also feel, other activities. What clubs that you guys have been involved in, sports, are you planning to continue those in college? If you could speak to that just a little bit.
I can start with this. I'm a member of the Attleboro High School Drama Club. I'm the vice president currently in my 7th production here at the high school. I've also been participating in the Model United Nations Club since freshman year. Outside of school, I am a Boy Scout. I just attained my Eagle Scout recently. And I am also a black belt in my karate system.
Jen and I mainly share a lot of the same activities. We enjoy doing things together, but we also share a lot of the same hobbies. I I guess I'll speak to athletics and You can speak to to sport. I think you can speak to clubs if you want to. Or
Oh,
sure. During our talk, she did sports and I did clubs, so
we're just
switch it around.
So yes, we've recently, in 11th and 12th grade, we've been a member of the Attleboro High School's Leo Club. We are senior representatives as of right now, and we are planning to front this Leo Club directed activity fundraiser to collect donated eyeglasses and hearing aids for refugees in need. We are also members of the Pottery Club, just as a hobby because we enjoy pottery. And we've been members of class council. We're also a member of the HS varsity softball team, 4 years on. She played first base, I played left field freshman year, and ever since sophomore, junior, senior year, we pitched.
Yeah, so speaking on that, not only would we start for varsity here, we also continue our softball outside for a club team called the Brand New Ball Game Rocks. I've been a member of that team, and so has she for like pretty much 6 years now. We started in recreational softball. We've been doing travel softball basically from when we were in 4th grade up till now because we still play set travel in the summer. We joined club in 7th grade, and we pitch for that team. And we also do a lot of leadership work because our dad is the general manager, and like we'll do a lot of things like inventory, helping little girls, like get used to the program. We always go to like the meetings, and we also kind of volunteer our time to coach like recreational like 10U and 8U pitching. So
So some of the extracurriculars that I'm involved in, band is one of them. I do marching band, concert band, and jazz band. I'm the low brass section leader, which is tubas, trombones, stuff like that. And I think that's definitely been like one of the big things throughout my school life because a lot of it is both in class because band takes up a block of our schedule, and also out of class, like out of school, where we have after school practices or practices in the evening. It's definitely like a huge life-changing experience to be in the marching band and in band in general because it gives you a group of kids and like almost like a family of sorts that you can be with your entire 4 years of school, bridging the gap between like seniors, juniors, freshmen, sophomore, and it's really a blast. I also am in the robotics club. I'm the president and lead programmer. I think one of the things that stands out the most for me is being able to teach some of the other programmers how the program works because I'm pretty passionate about computer programming and I'm recently learning Java as well. So being able to apply those concepts that I've been learning and teach them to other people, I feel like not only helps them achieve their passion of, wanting to help program the robot, but also kind of give me a better understanding of programming as a whole. And for the past couple of years, I've also been volunteering at Sturdy Memorial Hospital. And it's been pretty great, especially doing, my job as a volunteer is to transport patients on stretchers. And it was pretty jarring at first because, you kind of have the life of the patient in your hands, moving them around. But eventually I kind of got used to it. And I think it was a really life-changing experience, once again, to be in a hospital environment and see how things work, like meet patients and just experience the world.
Well, thank you to the 4 of you, and congratulations on great work so far, and I'm sure a great future ahead of you, and we look forward to hearing about all the great things that you continue to do, so thank you.
All right, so at this time, we'll hand out the awards. Daniel? Emily?
Are you sure?
We worked on this on Friday. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you so much. Do a picture. Yeah.
Thank you. Next, we have our Student Advisory Council Around Attleboro update. For that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Graber and Mr. Rooney.
So, for our SAC update, we have CMASC this Friday, October 25th. It's a gathering of all the local student councils in southeastern Massachusetts. Students have the opportunity to go. We go to leadership. I'm missing the word. Activities and yeah, and then
we will also be having, we're launching the Borough 84 project, which is going to be trying to change the perception to like the public that not all high school kids vape. It's actually 16% of students that do vape. That's the 84% that don't. We will also be having activities throughout the week just to kind of further show that we don't. The perception is that not all high school students do it, and matter of fact, it's only 16% that actually do, and we're just trying to change that perception.
so for our elementary schools, all of them have their parent-teacher conferences this Wednesday and Thursday on the 23rd and 24th. And Hill Roberts has, or the high school drama students performed their children's play on November 1st. This is a dry run for when it comes, before it comes through the high school.
All middle schools will be having their STEM week this week, and Wamsetta will also be having their student and staff flu clinic on Friday.
The high school has their flu clinic tomorrow, the 22nd, and on the 25th we have a student presentation on project-based learning at Regis College. Again, that's on Friday. The children's play is on the 2nd, so I said it was on the 1st. That's the dry run before it comes to the high school on the 2nd. It's at 3 p.m. in Bray Auditorium. Also on the 2nd is our Powder Puff football game between the juniors and seniors, and that is at 5 p.m. in the stadium.
We will be volunteering at the Blue Pride Palooza on Saturday, and it is sold out. We at the high school we also be having guest speakers on positive decision making, which are Kathy Meyer and Chris Sullivan, and we will have FAFSA Day for seniors on November 3rd. And that concludes our
Presentation.
Thank you guys very much. Moving on, we have our superintendent's report, and for that, I'll turn it over again to Mr. Sawyer.
Chair Withers, I have a couple brief things before we get to tonight's substantive presentations. And we all know we have something await us on the back end of tonight's meeting, so I will get right to it. Yeah, thank you. This Saturday, I had the pleasure of attending the AHS Athletic Hall of Fame. That's always a wonderful event that I think really highlights the accomplishments of former athletes, and it's a chance for the community to come together and honor those former athletes, but also to sort of reflect on the Attleboro High School community. And I just wanted to pass along that several people made a point of coming over and expressing their satisfaction with the high school and the direction of the district and the new project and several different topics. But it was just a real pleasant experience, and it was nice to get that positive feedback from so many different people at the event. So that was nice. This week is STEM Week. This is a statewide initiative. In Attleboro, we are doing things across the district, but we're especially doing some substantive things in our middle schools. STEM Week is to promote STEM careers. Our middle school teachers were trained this summer in preparation for this week-long set of activities. I am looking forward to some visits to the middle schools later this week, so I can see firsthand. I know Ms. Regan was there today to see the kickoff.
Yeah, it was great. I had the opportunity to visit Wamsutta this afternoon. Kids were building dams and actually trying to see if they worked, building kinetic sculptures, doing some engineering projects, researching life on the moon. So it was day one, and you could see the excitement and everyone's faces. And I'm hoping that as the week continues, that we'll just remain with them.
So we will be updating you on how that all went in a presentation in November. So we'll be getting back to you on how it went, but off to a good start and very excited about that this week. In terms of the high school project, if you've looked outside, it's pretty exciting. They are laying out the forms. There'll be concrete being poured later this week, and that'll go into next week. But the building is underway, and it's a pretty exciting moment to see that work being done. And then the last thing I would say is that while we're excited about the new project, we still have an old high school to contend with. And in true fashion, it sprung another steam leak this week. This morning, it's Monday. Happy Monday. This is a pretty familiar challenge for the high school and our facilities team. So we are hopeful that we will be able to address it and get things back in order, hopefully by the end of next week. So we're hoping to have that classroom back in shape for November 1st. But it's October, so this is probably the first of a couple we'll have this winter and winters to come. So as much as it's exciting that we have the new building, this building is going to continue to be a challenge for us all the way till we knock the thing down.
I bet it goes hard. I bet it goes hard.
Yeah, no, it's not gonna, it's gonna go kicking and screaming without question. All right, so at this time, I'd like to invite up Ms. D. Simone, our Data and Accountability Coordinator for the district, and I will turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Regan to set a purpose of the presentation.
Thank you, Superintendent Sawyer. As we've stated previously, the information provided by the MCAS is important to us, and we take it very seriously. But we also know that it's not a perfect assessment, and as evidenced by the students that were here with us tonight, we recognize that it is only one piece of a much larger picture, right? And so one thing that I would like for us to keep in mind is that this is a young accountability system. It's its second year, and some of the weighting and the formulas that are used make a large impact if there's either a small increase or decrease in scores. And so through the presentation that you'll see tonight with Ms. D. Simone, you'll be able to actually see some of that in action.
So good evening, everybody. Superintendent Sawyer, Assistant Superintendent Regan, school committee members, and the citizens of Attleboro. I'm here tonight to provide an update on the Attleboro Public Schools 2018-2019 accountability and achievement results. So tonight's presentation will focus on a quick review of the accountability system currently in its second year, and then we'll go over the APS district and schools 2019 accountability statuses. And then lastly, we'll focus on the 2019 achievement results. Just as we did last year, we're focusing on the journey ahead and need to understand the role of MCAS in our overarching mission here to develop and deliver relevant learning experiences that engage, challenge, and inspire all students to maximize their unique potential and improve our world. So, as Mr. Sawyer and Mrs. Regan said, that putting MCAS results into perspective, we as a district believe that MCAS is a single measure on a high-stakes test that just spans a few days. The results are not a comprehensive measure of what Attleboro Public Schools does, and the results are important, but it's not the complete story. We'll continue to find the right balance to get the most effort out of what we put into MCAS. The next 7 slides will be a very quick review of the accountability system. This portion of the presentation is necessary to put everything into perspective. So kind of the nuts and bolts of what we've got here. So overall, there are 5 main groups of indicators focused around student achievement, student growth, high school completion, English language proficiency, and additional indicators. These indicators have different measures in our two levels of schools, the non-high schools, which are grades 3 through 8, and high schools. The highlighted measures, so those are the ones that I highlighted up there, are newer ways to hold districts accountable. These include extended engagement rate, English language proficiency, chronic absenteeism, and the percentage of students completing advanced coursework, which includes AP and IB classes. These statistics were available but not part of the older accountability system. The highlighted measures are important because they provide information about performance and student opportunities just beyond test scores. As you can see, each indicator has different weights, with student achievement being the largest percentage. In Attleboro, our focus is to reach and teach every student in all classrooms across the district. So diving a little bit deeper, accountability determinations consist of a normative component and a criterion referenced component, which are used to classify districts and schools into accountability categories. The normative component focuses on how each school compares with all the other schools across the Commonwealth. I think of normative as an external check. And the criterion referenced component measures progress towards improvement targets within each school and within the district. And I view this measure as an internal check. So looking at the normative component a little bit more closely, we see that it compares the school with other schools across the Commonwealth administering the same assessments. APS has the first two types of schools, the non-high schools and the high schools. DESE compares schools with similar grade spans, ranks the schools, and then uses those rankings to assign an overall accountability percentile. Each level administers the next generation MCAS, except for high school science, which will be administered this year in the spring of 2020. It should be noted here that with the administration of each next generation MCAS subject test, that accountability percentiles cannot be compared to legacy MCAS test administrations, because the differing accountability frameworks are different and they've got different components. Changing gears to the criterion reference components, which are the internal comparisons within each school and district. Targets are set by the state that schools and districts are measured against. Targets for indicators are based on past trends and reasonable expectations for improvement. So in other words, targets are based on the average improvement of improvers. It's kind of difficult, but everybody okay with that concept? Okay. This slide shows two groups of students, the all students, or the aggregate group, and the lowest performing group. So it's important to know that DESE identifies and notifies each school of their lowest performing students. These students must be in the school for 2 consecutive years, 2 October SIMS cycles. They have the lowest ELA and math average scores. And lastly, they are not first or second year English learners. So each checked row measures the indicators to its right on the school's accountability reports. Okay. So throughout tonight's presentation, you'll see these numbers and these colors. Points are assigned on progress made towards targets for both the aggregate and the lowest performing group. So just a reminder that in 2017, students' performance was established as a baseline, and 2019 targets were set up within each school for the aggregate, again the lowest performing group, and the 11 state identified subgroups, if there were 20 or more in that group. 2019 performance was then compared to targets established in 2018, and a criterion referenced component was assigned to that group. We do understand that this accountability system is not perfect. However, it is an assessment that can measure the progress of all students in the district. The fewer number of years in an accountability system, the larger the effects will be from an increase or a decrease in achievement. To me, it matters where that increase or decrease landed. Each school's longitudinal history and achievement and growth is also being tracked to seek trends over time. Okay, so this is a very busy slide, but in essence, approximately 85% of schools across the Commonwealth do not require any assistance or intervention from the state. So within the not needing assistance or intervention section, there are 4 quartiles, ranging from limited or no progress towards targets to meeting or exceeding standards. The bookends, per se, on either end to those quartiles are schools of recognition, and on the other end, schools that require some sort of support from the state. It should be noted that last year there were only 2 categories in the not requiring assistance or intervention section, and so a school's accountability rating will be based on this year's, the 2019 categories. One last point to mention here is that these categories are based on specific weighting of achievement, student growth, high school completion, English language proficiency, and additional indicators for the aggregate and the lowest performing group. And just like last year, districts are now classified on performance as a whole district and not just on the performance of their lowest school. Districts are classified on criterion referenced components. In other words, they are compared to themselves year after year. Adjustments are made for a low graduation rate if that falls if it falls below 66.7%, and or low assessment participation in the MCAS below 95%. Attleboro does not fall into either one of those categories. In addition, you'll notice that districts do not have districts of distinction. That is specifically a school categorization. So, any questions on the 2019 overall viewpoint of the accountability system? Okay. So, on to how our district performed within the 2019 accountability system. So, looking at our report card, this slide is full of great news. Our overall classification is not requiring assistance or intervention, and the reason for that classification is making substantial progress towards targets. We earned that with a 51%, and you'll see from the graphics on the screen that we are 5 percentage points above the state. So it's good to get a good comparison. And the students and staff of Attleboro have much to be proud of here. Not only did we improve 13 percentage points from our 2018 rating, we also surpassed the state in every indicator in both years. These results highlight the amazing work that Attleboro students and staff do every day. For many years, Attleboro staff has been asked to do more with less, and our students greatly benefit from the dedication and diligent efforts of their school staff and the district staff working to support them. As far as the district's accountability status, 89% of our schools do not require assistance or intervention. Brennan Middle School landed in the requiring assistance or intervention, and I'll dive into those details as I get to Brennan's slide. So looking at the all students group, the aggregate group, it's really difficult to capture change over time in one graphic. So these results show the district's 2019 achievement compared to its 2018 achievement levels. So in summary, what this slide says is that ELA performed at the same levels as they did in 2018, and in the non-high schools, math and science met the DESE assigned targets, and at the high school, student achievement remained consistent with their 2018 achievement levels. When looking at student growth across the district, all 9 high schools and high school math are in the typical growth range, which is where they need to be, between 40 and 60%. And high school English is just on the cusp of typical growth at 39.7. Looking at the district viewpoint of the lowest performing group, again, a lot of great news in the lowest performing group across the district. In all accountability groups, improvement was evident. These students were identified by DESE in January 2019, which was roughly in the middle of the school year. Staff quickly and thoroughly acted on these lists and offered targeted instruction to these groups, and the results are very clear. The efforts paid off. As far as student growth goes, grades 3 through 8 are solidly in the typical growth category, and grade 10 student growth continues to be an area in need of improvement. Looking at schools' performance now across the district, we'll begin at the high school and then work our way down to the elementary schools in the district. So I'd like to do a quote from DESE at the beginning of here to understand why these are CPI. So DESE said, even though the grade 10 ELA and mathematics assessments transitioned to the next generation MCAS in 2019, DESE will continue to report high school ELA and mathematics achievement using the CPI for one more year. Through a statistical approach called equipercentile linking, DESE linked the 2019 grade 10 next generation MCAS results to the legacy MCAS results and calculated CPIs for each student taking the grade 10 ELA and mathematics assessments in 2019. By doing this, that allowed them to measure the change in achievement from 2018 to 2019 using a common measure. And beginning next year in 2020, with that accountability reporting, DESE intends to use, like all the other schools, the average scaled score. So that will be a change moving forward. So, looking specifically at how Attleboro High School did in their CPI achievement, essentially there was no change from their 2018 performance. So specifically in ELA, math, and science, AHS earned a no change, which really translates to a criterion reference component score of 1, meaning that they performed exactly what they did in the prior year. Looking at student growth, that also remained relatively consistent from last year's numbers. Grade 10 ELA is just on the cusp of hitting that typical growth mark. We're good for Attleboro High School? Okay. Moving on to our middle schools, first one we'll talk about is Wamsutta. Overall, Wamsutta showed significant gains from last year's ratings. These achievement increases garnered Wamsutta an additional 9 percentage points on the criterion reference target percentage from their 2018 level. Specifically in ELA and science, Wamsutta reached a criterion reference component score of 3, and in math, the earned target score was a 4, as students exceeded their DESE established target. Student growth in ELA and math remained consistent in the typical growth band. Overall, Coelho showed a significant gain in math and science. Specifically in math, Coelho earned a criterion reference component score of 3, which means that they met their target, and a 4, which means that they exceeded their target in science. In ELA, there was a decline of 0.7 scaled score points, which fell outside the plus or minus 0.5 band around the DESE established target score. So this is the first example that we're going to see tonight of where a small ripple looks like a larger wave in the second year of this accountability system. These overall positive changes, though, bottom line here at Coelho, resulted in raising its overall criterion reference target percentage by 19 points from its 2018 performance. So that's great news indeed. Lastly, looking at the student growth at Coelho, student growth in ELA and math remained consistent in the typical growth band. Brennan made outstanding gains from their 2018 ratings. They earned a whopping 47 percentage point increase in the criterion reference target percentage. Every accountability rating in 2019 was higher than its 2018 counterpart. Specifically looking at ELA and science, Brennan earned a criterion reference component score of 2, which was improved, and a 1, no change in math. In math, there was a decline of 0.2 scaled score points, which again fell within that 0.5 decline band from its 2018 scaled score performance. So, yet we see again how that little ripple, that small decline, looks like a bigger wave in this 2-year-old accountability system. Student growth remained consistent as the Brennan students are now being compared to similar test performers across the Commonwealth. And I'd like to switch gears now into the Asian subgroup and the reasons why Brennan is still classified as requiring assistance or intervention. These pictures clearly tell the story of the Asian subgroup's 29 performance. They handedly outperformed their 2019 targets and earned top marks in ELA and math. So the obvious question is, why? Right? Why are they in need? Why does DESE classify them as need of improvement? So, by definition, subgroup percentiles measure the subgroup's relative standing to like subgroups across the Commonwealth. In other words, Brennan's Asian subgroup is being compared to all other non-high school Asians across the state. Despite improving their annual criterion reference target percentage from 9% to 88%. Yes, that's a 79 percentage point increase. The fact that there are only 2 years in this accountability system pulled down their 2019 subgroup percentile. DESE's formula did not allow them to move out of the status because of the 2-year weighting. 2018's report was worth 40%, and this fabulous 2019 report was 60%. So I speculate that with sustained rigor and achievement, Brennan should be cleared of this status next year.
Mr. Flynn, you have a question?
Yeah, about how many students make up the subgroup? Do you know offhand?
About 30.
About 30.
Mr. Storrs?
Looking specifically at the Asian subgroup, I noticed 3 of the grades have less than 10, 5, 9, and 11, actually, so 11, 5, and 9. So the 11, I see that there's actually statistics, but for the others, I
Yeah,
don't.
so for a subgroup to count, it has to be 20 or more.
Okay.
For a grade, but since
For,
they have-
for the entire school, which is 5 through 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I ask is, so looking at grade 6, grade 7, grade 8, because the numbers are down in the 6, 5, and 8, there is no exceeds, meets, or partially meets, or needs statistics for those groups because they're so small.
So they'll look at that group holistically,
Only
that subgroup holistically, yeah. Did I answer your question, Mr. Storrs?
You did.
Okay, thank you. Alright, so let's move on to our elementary schools. We'll begin with Willett. At first blush, these pictures tell the story of not great results at Willett, but pictures can be deceiving. So in ELA, even though there was a 2-point drop, the 2019 average landed in the meeting expectations category. So it's above 500 points. It's the meeting category, or the meeting expectations category. In math, there was a modest 0.8 of a point drop from the 2018 average. Because, again, we see that decline was a little bit more than 0.5 scaled score points from 2018, the picture shows another decline. However, I'd like to point out that what these pictures do not show is that Willett's 4th graders surpassed the state by 18 scaled score points in ELA, and that in 4th grade, Willett surpassed the state by 2 scaled score points in math. So, indeed, a decline is a decline, but be mindful of where they land on the next generation MCAS scale.
Mr. Domenici?
I just had a
sorry.
quick question.
Yes,
Was last year, was Willett the exceeding school in
that
the
was
district?
Hyman Fine.
Oh, it was Hyman Fine,
Yep,
okay.
Hyman
I was
Fine.
trying to remember
And
which of the
yes,
two.
we had 2 schools that came close this year,
Yeah,
but
okay,
didn't meet for a variety of reasons, yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So a lot of great news to report here at Thatcher. Student growth was amazingly high, 83%, I believe it was. Yeah, it's crazy. So, in fact, when I looked at the schools across the Commonwealth and I rank ordered them by student growth percentile, what I discovered was that Thatcher popped up on the list twice in the first 15 spots. It hit number 11 in math and number 15 in ELA. To your point, last year Hyman Fine was a school of recognition. This year, Thatcher missed being a school of recognition as its 2019 cumulative criterion reference target percentage was 73, and the minimum requirement was 75%. So lots of great work going on at Thatcher. Really, really great work.
Mr. Quinn?
This is my favorite slide, and I'm asking this rhetorically.
Sure.
But what exactly would the growth have had to have been in math in order for them to have hit their aggregate?
I know, it's pretty crazy, right? So there are a few criteria, right, that they have to meet to be a school of recognition. Yeah, it's a decline. But look where it landed, right? It landed in the meeting category, meeting expectations.
Yeah, no, it's more just amusing to me. You have like, it technically declined in their math achievement, yet they had outstanding.
I know, yeah.
Nah, it's my favorite.
It is a conundrum, yes. So digging a little bit deeper here at Thatcher, in ELA, 2019 achievement increased a 1/10 of a point, which earned Thatcher a criterion reference component score of a 2, which means that they met their target. In math, the decline was 1.2 scaled score points, which technically in the DESE accountability system earns them a 0. But as I mentioned on Willett's slide, I'd like to focus on where the school landed. Both achievement ratings landed in the meeting expectations category. So there seems to be a recurring theme here. The pictures can be deceiving. Studley's data shows 2 declines in their criterion reference component scores. However, if the focus is placed on where those declined scores landed, Studley did land in the meeting expectations category. Once again, what these pictures don't show is that Studley surpassed the state in all 4 MCAS areas. Specifically, they surpassed the state in grade 3 ELA by 7 points, grade 3 math by 1 point, grade 4 ELA by 8 points, and grade 4 math by 10 points. So we see again that targets set by DESE do not take into account the overall growth of a child. Again, right, the accountability system is so new, small declines from the prior year's scores make it seem like the entire school is performing below expectations, but that is clearly not the case. The Hyman Fine Hawks continue to shine. Their overall accountability percentile is 85%, which is phenomenal. Yet again, when you look at the red in the math domain, it's tempting to misread that indicator. But looking at the details in math in grade 3, Hyman Fine did trail the state by 1 point. However, in grade 4, Hyman Fine surpassed the state by a whopping 19 points. In ELA, grade 3 surpassed the state by 9 points, and grade 4 ELA surpassed the state by 27 points. Phenomenal work, Hyman Fine Hawks. Last year, Hyman Fine was recognized as a school of recognition based on student growth. This year's student growth scores remained maxed out with 4 out of 4 points. Keep on shining, Hyman Fine. And at Hill Roberts surpassed their 2019 target in math and garnered a criterion reference component score of 4. This correlates with the math student growth percentile, which increased from its 2018 rating. It should be noted here in math that there is still some work to do as the scaled score is approaching but has yet to land at the meeting expectations level. However, the strategic and targeted interventions employed last year definitely paid off. In ELA, there was a decline in 2019 achievement by 1 point, which was not a major decline. But again, we see the small ripple as a perceived major wave in the DESE accountability system at Hill Roberts. There is room for academic growth in ELA as scaled scores are still on the cusp of meeting expectations. So So we come to our summary. Overall, Attleboro Public Schools, students, staff, parents, and community members have a lot to be proud of in the 2019 Accountability Report. Pictures and accountability reports can be deceiving. It's really important to know each school's data story and know it in context. The more years we have into this accountability system, the more stable that the data will be. Right now, small increases or decreases seem to be more impactful than they really are within the system. And lastly, as already mentioned, these scores do not represent the full picture of Attleboro schools. This information is taken seriously because we learn from the trends and patterns that are revealed in it, and we look closely at our systems to make changes that yield the greatest impact to support the needs of all students across the Commonwealth, and here specifically in Attleboro. Questions?
Mr. Geddes?
As much as I love data and research, this stuff gives me both a popsicle headache and absolutely melts my brain all at once. So thank you for all of your research into this and
Thank you, Mr. Geddes. I appreciate
and
that.
a way to break it down for us.
Thank you.
My question is, because like you said, all of these pictures can be deceiving.
Yes.
This DESE puts out the report based on, so they're just kind of floating this information out there without any of the context that you just provided to us.
Correct.
That demonstrates all of the great work that's happening. Is there a way for that context to be added to what DESE is doing? And more to Mr. Sawyer, where do we stand with getting rid of these tests?
I'm glad I'm not handling that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason for hope that the tests are going away. I think the best hope is that we will continue to take steps as a state, but also locally as well, in putting these tests in their proper context, seeing the bigger picture and valuing learning over chasing scores and the short-term achievement goals, which don't necessarily yield the results that I think they're intended to.
Mr. Storrs?
Thank you. So let me preface my question by saying I totally agree with you. Test is not the big picture. It's just
Right.
it's one piece of the puzzle. But I personally like getting into the data and going on that website as soon as it's out and creating a couple hundred pages worth of stuff to look at. So
Share that in common.
yeah, I will say a lot of positive things from what I've seen. A couple of questions. One area of concern for me, and you touched on it a little bit, was the one school that requires assistance.
Brennan Middle School?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
and from looking at the data, it looks like math seems, at least for the higher grades, it seems
Yes.
like math seems to be the area. Everywhere else seemed to be pretty good overall.
Agreed, yeah.
So my question would be, what's the next steps in regard to that?
So Brennan is, and I'm going to acquiesce too to Mrs. Regan, but I can tell you that Brennan is involved with a, what is it, that improvement?
So last year they had to write, because they were requiring assistance last year as well, they had to write an improvement plan. So they're implementing that plan this year. Part of that is implementing illustrative math in grade 6, and they've been going to trainings at the state level, professional development, working in small groups. I know Dr. Souza is working hard to turn that around, and as evidenced by the work that was done with the Asian subgroup, he continues to talk about that as well at all staff meetings, common planning meetings, to try to turn all that around.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Quinn?
I've been kind of following in the footsteps of my colleague, Mr. Domenici, recently traveling up to Boston by the commuter rail. And I've been reliant on, since I'm not familiar with Boston, I've been reliant on the maps and the T station, getting to understand the red line and the orange line and just getting to where I need to go. And I think that the maps there provide some really useful information. But I think the maps are limited once I get out of that train station, right? That it can't tell me where I need to walk around the rest of the city to get to where I need to go. And I think much like any sort of map is not a territory, a map of the Boston subway system is not Boston in and of itself. The MCAS results for Attleboro is not Attleboro Public Schools. And I think what's challenging along those similar lines is that sometimes the maps feel more real to us than the actual thing. and we spend a lot of time and there's an earnestness that comes with us when we look at the MCAS scores. Sometimes more so than some other things that other potential maps that would be should be given the same level because it provides another piece of information. What I appreciate about this administration is that they are clear that we're not going to try to shape the territory or the district to fit the map and what the map wants us to be. And I think, and we'll get to this a little bit later in the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee report, is what we need is different maps and different ways of capturing what goes on in the district, and not to overemphasize one means of measurement over the other. Because I think that, I think the real value, and this is just me, is that when we dive into the item analysis to find out, all right, so what do these numbers actually mean in terms of changing teaching and learning? And what does that mean over a course of years? Now, was it just, this year, this strand just didn't get hit as well? Or is it over the last 3 years we haven't hit, let's just take transformations in 8th grade math, right? Like that's one area that we just never get to. That's where that map becomes really important and informational. And I know this is really important for public accountability. I love your presentation, and I love your presentation style.
Thank you,
It's
Mr. Quinn. I
one of the
appreciate it.
highlights. And I think you do a really nice job of making it accessible to the public. I think the real work is where, or additional work comes in figuring out what this map really means. And I think it's one level, the percentages, so that tells you where our attention needs to go. So thank you for your efforts
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Quinn.
Mr. Larson?
I also enjoy the presentation. Couple of reasons. I think it's a good time to reflect on our strengths and weaknesses. But the other half of my brain struggles with the presentation because we're comparing one 3rd grader to a 4th grader who, last year's 3rd grader is in 4th grade now.
Right.
So how did last year's 3rd grader compare to this year's 3rd grader, which is a completely different person, but we're going to compare the two of them. And the same thing with last year's 10th grader to this year's 10th grader, who are two different people. And even the subgroups. I mean, we talked about one of the subgroups.
Right.
The subgroups are slightly different people than they were
Every year.
a year ago.
Right.
And so from a data bias point of view, it's hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that we're making a comparison from last year's 3rd grader to this year's 3rd grader when they're two completely different people. Now, granted, we have like a few hundred of them, so we can kind of do some averaging, but the data isn't clean. It's not the same people taking the same test
So we,
prior. So, I mean, you have to make some assumptions, and anytime you're doing data review, knowing that you have to make assumptions, there's only so much that you can draw from it. And so, I mean, I love the snapshot of how we're doing compared to the average at the state, but I also get concerned because we're not comparing the same students.
So I do a few things within the scope of my position. One of them is a cohort analysis that follows groups of kids, the same group of kids over a few years, and the trending. So I've created a 3-year look back from 2017, 2018, 2019 of both achievement and growth at each school, so that, albeit not the same kids, it's the same, theoretically, I guess, the same teachers, with the same kids passing through them. And then we can follow that cohort of kids too to see if there's a problem that needs to be addressed along the line. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that we can.
I mean, I'm not. I mean, there's definitely information there that's very relevant and that we need to know. I guess. But to try to go too far with it, sometimes I get concerned because there are shortcomings in some of the comparisons.
Agreed. Yeah.
So, but great job, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. I appreciate that.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Echoing what
Thank you.
Mr. Getty said, I don't know how you put all the information together in a presentation that I can follow and I think everyone else can follow, so, well,
Very good.
thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
I appreciate it. All right. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This time I want to turn it back to Ms. Regan to discuss the grade span reconfiguration.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you. This is the start of a long conversation about whether or not this is something that we feel is what we should do as a district, and whether or not we have the support from our community and our staff and our teachers. So tonight is the first opportunity for us to start this conversation, and we will be continuing the conversation with our elementary families throughout the month of November. So without further ado, I'll get us started. So this all started with Envisioning 2020, which we were charged to come up with the optimal district configuration. And so as part of that, we needed to look at and research and develop a long-range plan, and also to look at the start times for each of the schools. So one of the things that we realized is that because we have 5 K-4 schools, we're spread across the city in 5, but then anytime that we wanted to add something to one of our schools for a particular grade level, we had to do it 5 times in order to make it equitable. We also realized that currently our understaffing requires us to transport the students across the city at an additional cost. So what happens is, with the caps that we currently have at our elementary classrooms, once we reach that cap, we don't allow any more students to go into that classroom, and then we do transport them to a different school in the city, and that increases our costs for transportation. And as a result of that, there are inequities in our class sizes across the district, because where some districts, or the way the city is districted, in those schools where there are lots of children in neighborhoods, they have the highest numbers, and in other buildings where there are not as many neighborhoods, not as many students, they have lower class sizes. And so that lends to our discussion about redistricting as well. And then just to go back to the last point right there, the current span K-4 is not aligned to the developmental needs. So when you look at the students that are in K-1, their needs for foundational literacy skills, foundational math schools are significantly different than the needs of students that are in grades 2 to 4. And another piece to that is the schedule that's created in a K-4 school. Much like we discussed tonight for the accountability system, the schedule is created to support the needs of our students in grades 3 and 4, because that's where the accountability lies. So some positive outcomes that we have if we were to reconfigure is it would maximize the impact of our limited resources. So as I mentioned before, anytime we wanted to do something in one school, we would need to do it 5 times. If we were to create the spans so that they were shorter and made a K-1 school or 2 K-1 schools, which I'll show you the plan further on in the presentation tonight, then we would be able to greatly impact the students that are in those spans, because we'd be able to allocate resources specifically to them in that school. Specific student needs can be targeted with smaller spans. So when you're looking at students that are learning early literacy skills, you'd be able to really focus and target that. As you know, when students enter schools, they come in with a range of skills, some having gone to preschool, some not. And as a result, the needs of those students when they enter us vary quite drastically. And so we'd be able to quickly close that achievement gap in the earlier grades, so that when they do move up into the upper elementary grades, that gap would be much smaller. Right now we have 1 preschool location, so if we were to have 2 pre-K to 1 schools, then we'd be able to increase the location and increase the number of students that we have in preschool. So some additional considerations that we do recognize is that the neighborhoods that once had the younger families with students, school-age children, those are now empty nesters. And now the neighborhoods that once didn't have any children now have lots of children included in them. There's also been new developments that have been built over the recent years, and the last time that the city was redistricted was in the early 90s. And so thinking about redistricting would greatly support our need to equal out class sizes. We also want to take a look at school times. Research is showing that the start time for high school students starting later in the morning at about between 8 and 8:30 is better for them, not only academically, but mentally and for their mental and physical health as well. It supports and increases their attendance and then their overall school performance. And we also know that if you have little ones at home, they're up at the crack of dawn, ready to start school with vim and vinegar, and they are exhausted by the end of the day, and they're the ones that get out the latest. And so we do want to take a look at start times as well. And as I mentioned before, we really want to make sure that we're starting to close that achievement gap earlier in the grade span. Additional considerations that we looked at was specifically grade 5. Have to be honest, that was one of the main reasons why we jumped into this research, was because we wanted to try to have grade 5 move down and to be in part of the elementary. But when we looked at the different configurations, we realized that it would create another tier of busing because too many students would need to be bused at the same time. And when we looked at the facilities of the schools, we would need to remodel the bathroom facilities for students so that they would be able to use them, the 5th grade students would be able to use them, because currently they're created right now for younger elementary age students. So this is the proposed configuration. We were looking to have 2 lower elementary schools. They would house preschool, kindergarten, and grade 1, and those would be Studley Elementary School and Thatcher Elementary School. And then the upper elementary schools would be grades 2, 3, and 4, and those would be Hyman Fine, Hill Roberts, and Willett. So to date, the Operations and Infrastructure Council did most of this research. They prepared and researched 2 proposals to determine if one was viable. The one that they did propose that had grade 5 moved down, we realized through all of that research that it wasn't possible for the reasons that I shared before. And the other proposal is the one that I'm sharing with you this evening. We also spoke with the Attleboro Education Association leadership and met with all of the teachers in the elementary schools last spring. We also provided them a survey that we asked them to complete to determine if they approved of the concept. We all know that change is hard, it's anxiety producing, but if they approved of the concept, we wanted to know if with that approval, then we would continue to move on with our research and get further into the weeds, because at this point now there are lots of logistical details, including personnel and facilities and curriculum that we would need to dive into, and so we didn't want to do that unless we knew that we had the AEA on board with us. So the initial results of the survey indicated that more than 50% of the staff approved of the concept. 37.4 did not support the concept, so that gave us the green light, so to speak, so that we could continue to do our research. And then once we had all of that information fairly laid out, then we would be able to send them another survey later on at the end of this year.
Lori,
Yep.
those percentages, so were they consistent from school to school?
I'd have to go back and look more closely at the schools individually to see if they were.
Yeah, I guess what I'd be interested in
Yep.
is if like Thatcher and Dudley, for instance, had a different, significantly different approval than the other schools that were going to be upper middle, elementary schools.
Right.
Mr. Storrs?
Was the high school staff surveyed on that? Because in this doesn't really directly affect them.
It was not.
They were not. Thank you.
Just the elementary staff were surveyed.
Thank you.
I apologize because when you talked about this at the teaching and learning subcommittee, I didn't notice the numbers, but if I'm not mistaken, that adds up to about 96%.
Yeah.
Do we know what the other?
So there are about 5%, give or take, that chose other on the survey, and many of those people responded that they were retiring and wasn't something that they were interested in weighing in on, and so
Okay.
those were some of the responses that we had there.
Okay. I didn't know if it was like a 4% didn't respond or. Okay. Thank you.
So what we're doing right now, Superintendent Sawyer and I will be visiting each of the elementary schools, the PTO meetings throughout November to continue this conversation with the families, answer any of the questions and talk to them about the concerns that they have. Internally, we'll be creating committees to discuss the personnel, curriculum and operations that we had spoken about before. And then we will again be administering a survey to families to gauge their interest as well as staff again at the end of the year. The proposed timeline that we have, so last year we presented the information to the AEA. This year we will have family forums. We're looking to redistrict, research the start times, and survey staff and families. Next year, if all goes well with the surveys, then we'll continue to prepare the facilities and prepare for the transition. And then we're hoping to implement in the year of 21-22 of the new configuration.
Mrs. Scales?
So let's just say the grade span gets kiboshed. Are we still going to be moving forward with redistricting?
Yeah, we have to
We
redistrict
have
no
to.
matter what.
Right. Okay.
So my question related to that says 2019, 2020 redistricting. Are we redistricting as if it doesn't get voted down or put on the back burner and we do grade reconfiguration? Are we redistricting at the same time, or are we redistricting prior to that?
So we're trying to make this the configuration decision first, and then we're going to redistrict based on what that decision is.
Okay.
We don't want to do it twice.
Right. So so that was my question. So if we do go along with the reconfiguration, we would redistrict at the same time.
Yes.
Let's get it.
And along the same lines, the changes in start time, is that that's
All go in at the same time.
well, more my question was, is the change of the start time, is that change going to happen regardless of the realignment of grades, or?
We're
will
going
that
to have a
happen?
conversation as a district as to whether or not we're brave enough to do the right thing on start times. And assuming that we are, then we would do it in concert with this. I mean, this decision affects that one, not whether we do it or not, but how we logistically plan it out.
And Ms. Regan, you had mentioned that based on research, there's obvious academic improvement in the change of times. Obviously, we're in the Northeast and still doing it this way. What other parts of the country are going with the inverse of what we're doing right now?
So California just passed a law stating that they wanted the high schools couldn't start later than 8:30, and the other schools would start earlier than that. Middle school and elementary would start earlier than that. So.
Mrs. Doris?
So with the later start for the high school, I mean, one of the big concerns I could see is the after-school programs, the sports, and jobs. I would imagine students who have jobs especially, this would impact them. Has there been any discussion regarding that, and what's the general thought on how this would affect sports, clubs, and jobs?
Right. So looking at the schedule, most of the games don't start until later on in the afternoon. It would be practices that would be impacted, and we're looking at the way that the schedule is currently configured, so that at the high school schedule, maybe there's a possible way that we could put in some like experiential learning time at the end of the day, so that students would be able to leave for internships or service learning projects or even jobs before the end of the day.
Have we polled coaches at all on this yet?
We haven't. We just started with all of our research on start times.
Yeah, I mean, Sharon already went to a later start time, so there's some precedent that
Possible.
you can do this. There's a lot of talk within the Hockomock about this topic, so I think the more of us that start to take action, the more that there's going to be a system solution to help us with that. But, you know, as Assistant Superintendent Regan has stated, the high school, there are a lot of things the high school can do to make sure that this doesn't have a negative impact on our other programming.
Mr. Quinn?
I know it's early in the process, but have you given thought to the process of redrawing the redistricting lines and what that's going to look like yet, or is it too early?
No, we haven't started that yet. Right.
Mr. Sawyer?
Thank you. I think this is going to be a wonderful thing if it comes to fruition for the city, not only the start times, but just the redistricting period.
Thank you.
Mr. Domenici?
One of the things, it wasn't in the presentation that we noted in the subcommittee, is that, you know, from grades 2 on, you're going to see a consistency of where the kids are going to school. So you'll have 3 elementary schools, 2 through 4, which will feed into each one of the 3 middle schools, and then ultimately in the high school. So you've got the span of kids, students staying together for, you know, most of their academic career, which can also be helpful. So just, you know, one of the things I recall from our subcommittee meeting we didn't have on here, but
Right.
perhaps something that type of consistency probably would resonate well, at least with parents. I know from, you know, me as a father of 3, absolutely.
Right.
We have the, every year it seems like there's the, you know, the discussion as to which kid will go, and, you know, where their friends go from one to the other. So, I don't know. I see that resonating with a lot of parents, so.
Mr. Storrs?
So as far as the, you know, changing of the different schools, I definitely see the benefits. At the same time, change is always hard, and I could see a lot of parents having some concerns. For me, it's more of the logistic concerns, knowing Hill Roberts, which means I know Hyman Fine pretty well. I know the layout, I know how many effective students we could have in there, especially at the higher grades and the larger students, less room. And with the open classroom, there's some minor benefit to the open classroom, not a lot, but one is by having all classes in the same wing, you are able to cover each other and do cross training and teaching and things like that. I would imagine this would require, there's no way you're going to be able to fit all of the students from the same grade in the same wing, knowing that school. I mean, pretty much it's 100 students, give or take, per wing, 2 on each floor, and then you also have the bubble, and you have the kindergarten classroom, and you have the art room if you want to convert that, which we have. The point being, logistically, I have questions. Would it be possible to provide our student population data as well as how many students we feel we can fit in each of the schools being affected by this? Thank you.
Sure, but just a quick answer is that the total number of students in each school doesn't really change with this.
Okay.
It's just, you know, how many of each grade are in that school.
Right.
So, but the totals won't change.
Okay, and those 2 sets of data would show that. Thank you.
Mr. Larkin?
I guess when you're out meeting with the PTOs, I guess one of my concerns with the changing of the start times, I mean, I understand from a biology point of view which kids get up early and which ones don't. But I guess my concern for the families would be if families are relying on high school kids to pick up elementary school kids off the bus in the afternoon. There are a lot of working families and not as many parents at home. So I guess that would be one of my questions to the parent groups, if you have the opportunity to ask. Because we could be kind of messing with a family schedule by doing some of this, but I obviously see the pros for doing it also. But
Quite frankly, that's my largest concern, is how much the community sees that as a problem.
Because I mean, I'm sure there's lots and lots of households that rely on the older siblings to watch the younger siblings until people get home from work.
Yeah, I mean, there are some trends that are working in our favor on this topic. I think the number of families that are large enough for that to be a driving concern is reduced. There's what's much more common now than was even 10 years ago is, you know, you've got 2 children who are within, you know, 2 or 3 years of each other. That's much more common than it was when I started here in the 90s, when you had lots of families of 5 and 6 students, with the oldest one being the caretaker for the younger ones. There are still families that are in that situation, so I don't want to indicate otherwise, but that's less the case than it once was. So I'm hopeful that that's helpful. And I would remind the community that we have an excellent after-school care program here in Attleboro. So, for some families, that would be an option that I think helps with it as well.
Thank you.
Superintendent Regan, you had said that there was a local school that also follows this program now. I believe it was Norton?
Yes.
Yes, and so have you heard any feedback from them with issues regarding this, like not no one being able to pick up the younger children?
Actually, it's Sharon Public Schools
Sharon?
that
Okay.
has the later start time for high school. That wasn't one of the concerns that was brought to our attention when I had spoken to colleagues that I know that work in that district. That wasn't one thing. What was the concern at first, but it didn't pan out, was jobs and sports. And so they were able to work it out. And I think that's part of the solution, being able to have conversations with the community and with families, and to be able to talk out some of the concerns ahead of time, and then support everyone through the implementation and the change, because as we said before, it can be anxiety producing if you don't know exactly what's going to happen. But Norton does have a different configuration. Lots of districts have different configurations, and it's usually what's best for that community and the facilities that you have. And so looking at our community and the facilities that we have, this is one proposal that we think would benefit our students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Quinn?
I think regardless of any proposal that you come up with, there are going to ultimately be trade-offs, right? We accept trade-offs right now. Right now, our trade-offs are that our kids in the high school come off as zombies, because they're not quite awake for the first hour, and we've got our youngsters who are, it's not really old using that term, youngsters. I feel like I'm 80. I don't use that term, right? Like 80-year-old.
Should get off your line, Mr.
Yeah,
Quinn.
I guess so. But they're getting home, exhausted, or maybe the last hour of school isn't as productive for them as they're tired, and so we're accepting those right now. And I think we've just got to be mindful that there's not going to be any solution here that doesn't come off with them. And the crucial thing I'll just say for you, my colleagues who are going to ultimately be part of the decision-making team, is that's going to be part of it. Secondly, with any sort of emotionally charged topic, there's going to be voices, and some tend to be louder than others. And what I would not want to see, either in favor or against, is that a handful of loud voices tend to sway what is a much larger picture. And so I say this knowing that you'll take this with all the evidence presented to you, but just as kind of like a warning that this could be one of those situations where I'm hearing from people should probably be more than 4, rather than, particularly if it's a loud voice. So I wish you the best in this.
Mrs. Gill?
We have 2 student voices, just quickly, later start time.
Personally, I think that moving the school, if you move it back an hour, it's going to move everything back an hour. So my practice is going to end an hour later. I'm going to eat dinner slightly later, but I'm going to start my homework an hour later too. And my homework is still going to take up the same amount of time no matter when I start it, and that it's not going to increase the amount of sleep I get, making me still come into school. Even if it's at 8:30, I'm still going to be a zombie. But that's
Thank
me.
you.
The other thing that I was going to say was, you said that maybe like a last walk would be like experiential learning. I think that in theory that would be a good thing, but on the other hand, there would be upperclassmen that would have cars, or kids that live closely that would be like, all right, I'm just going to go home. I say I have a job, and then just go home, and an hour early or 30 minutes early, whatever
Take advantage of the system.
it would be.
Thank you.
Mrs. Storrs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think it's great that we have already polled the teachers. Was it only the AEA that we polled, or did we go to paras as well?
Paraprofessionals.
Okay, very good. But I do think, and I know that the next step is parents and families, but I think the students, I think it would be really good to hear from the students, maybe survey the students as well. This is going to directly impact future students, so hearing, as we just heard from them just now, but hearing from all the students I think would be valuable.
Mr. Geddes?
Going back to something Mr. Domenici said a little while ago about the straight path that the students would go through, is there any research related to change of buildings and the number of changes in buildings? So right now, the typical student in Attleboro goes through 3 schools. This would put them through 4. Is there anything that indicates that having any impact, positive or negative, on how they learn through all 12 years? Or
And so I think it goes back to what worked for your community. That was all of the research that I've seen, looking at the facilities, looking at the resources that you have, and making that configuration work for you. Another thing that I did want to mention, if we were to have 2 schools with preschools, then those preschool students would then stay within those schools for pre-K, K, and 1, and they would be able to stay with each other there. When you move into the 2 to 4 schools, Willett would seamlessly transition to Brennan, Hyman Fine would seamlessly transition to Wamsutta, and Hill Roberts would seamlessly transition to Coelho. And so I know for a lot of students that are in some of our schools, Thatcher, for example, those students in that school go to, I think, all 3 middle schools. And so depending on where they live, that's a little anxiety producing for them because they're not exactly sure where they're going. They don't know who their friend group will be. And so sometimes that causes more anxiety than necessary too.
and just to, because I think I mentioned this during the subcommittee meeting, we are a Studley family that will not go to Brennan, and my wife consistently reminds me that someone should address the fact that we can see that middle school, but we're not going there. The other question I had was, if you get a chance, if you could share, I don't know about the rest of the committee, but I'd love to go to at least one of the PTO meetings.
Yeah.
So if we could get the dates and times for those, that would be awesome. But thank you.
Mrs. Sawyer?
Thank you. I think if you ask the high school students about start time, I think you'll get mixed feelings, because I know in my area, I see the kids out there 5:45 waiting for the bus, and I feel that they would appreciate a much later start time versus like kids that could walk around here that are much closer, that they don't realize that some students are getting up at 5. That's rough. Thank you.
Mrs. Sawyer?
Thank you. Yeah, so, to piggyback on that, but then I have another point that I'm wondering about. So I definitely agree. Different subgroups of students are going to have different reasons why they would like this or not like this. So part of the question in the survey with them would be the why. I think I'd like to hear the why. Sports students may have a concern because of sports. Students with jobs may have a concern because of jobs. Students who don't have either of those things may be great with this, get to sleep in an extra hour. So I think the why would matter. But my other question has to do with the preschool, the pre-K. You were talking about expanding. It sounded like expanding what we are currently doing. Is the funding that is the funding for pre-K students the same as for any student, or is it different?
We do not get as much.
So we're talking about expanding, and again, pre-K is a great thing, don't get me wrong, but we're talking about expanding what we're currently offering, which would require additional staff.
So we don't have a choice but to offer those services for students who are identified as having needs.
But we go beyond that, and we've been doing that forever. We go.
So the concern here is that the number of students who require those services is growing, and we are running out of space to provide the classrooms required to do so. So I'm not talking about, it's not so much about opening up more classrooms for the peer models.
Okay.
It's about to open up a classroom for the students who were required to open up one. We also have to bring in those models. So that's what's driving that need for growth.
Now, it would seem to me that keeping it all at one school, Thatcher, would make more sense than splitting the program between 2 different. But it sounds like you're actually thinking about having it at 2 different places.
Yeah, so one, the room isn't there at Thatcher.
Even if we do this, there wouldn't be enough room there?
Well, so we wouldn't do that because we would want back to transitions for those students to stay in the same school for 3 years.
I get that.
We think that there's an advantage there. You know, it's
But
back
there
to
definitely
Mr.
would
Quinn's
be-
point about trade-offs.
Right.
In our mind, having a school get to know a family and have a consistent relationship with the family over those 3 years would be,
Yeah, but there would definitely be an impact to the budget.
Or even
as
4
far
years in
as
some cases.
FTEs. We would have to increase FTEs, which we may have to do anyway based on the,
yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So, okay.
Okay.
So just to close,
That was good dialogue.
we really want to continue the conversation with families and with staff to just determine support before we move forward with any other contemplated change. So, thank you for letting us start the conversation tonight. We do appreciate it. And I will be sending you those dates and then the other information that you requested.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Regan.
Thank you.
That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. Next, we have our minutes from our October 7th, 2019 meeting. The minutes were circulated with your packet. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion or changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Consent agenda. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $3,000 from the Feinstein Foundation to Thatcher Gifts and Donation Lines for educational purposes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 53A, Section 53A and a half, motion to accept an iPad with the value of $614 from the Lions Club for MDAP at the high school.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $50 from William and Rose Larson to the Attleboro High School Gifts Donation Line.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $5,200 from the class of 2019 for the purchase of teacher Chromebooks and tablets for the computer science course at Attleboro High School.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $650 in memory of Nolito Carlino to be deposited in the gifts and donation line at Attleboro High School for Best Buddies program.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $300 to the Attleboro Public Schools from Richard Moran to assist with outstanding school lunch accounts.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to approve the proposed field trip proposal for 135 Attleboro High School U.S. history students to attend New York City on March 27th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that concludes our consent agenda. One subcommittee report tonight, teaching and learning. Mr. Quinn?
Thank you. Long meeting, much like we're having right now, because we also discussed the grade span reconfiguration plan, and all of the items that we discussed here came out on the floor. Other items from the agenda is one is the ELA pilot update, and what's really nice as a parallel is that the same deliberative process that you're seeing for the grade span reconfiguration has been a part of this ELA pilot rollout. So now we're in the phase where it's down to the final two. There's a Wonders program and a collaborative literacy program. Both are viable. Again, very much mirroring the conversation, there are trade-offs in terms of what helps develop students' fluency versus what helps develop students' love of reading. A lot of fantastic conversations going on amongst the teachers. I think there will be some really tough decisions down the road, but I think the best aspects of both will ultimately become blended into whatever the final decision is for the grade spans. But again, I think it's the process that really matters the most, and it just reflects what's going on with Attleboro Public Schools. We also talked about the Chromebook rollout. 1,000 Chromebooks have been disseminated to students in grades 5 through 9. Students in grades 5 included a case for protection. The district also wisely provided a insurance program on the devices, so that way in case there's any sort of incidental damage, we're covered. The other thing is families, please have your children charge their devices each night. We are not in a position to be able to charge them here. I know it's a problem in my district, so please have your children charge them, and it's okay. Please don't have them taken up to their room. Have a nice charging spot. It'll make sure that they're ready to go for the next morning. Two other items that I think tie back into our discussion about the MCAS and finding better maps and other maps for data that can bring us a better understanding of our students. We had an update on the Massachusetts Consortium for Innovative Education Assessment. The last several years, we've been developing pilot performance tasks that are more authentic, more realistic, but now it's getting to the point where we've got to start moving as presenting them as an alternative or complementary to the MCAS. There's pilot initiatives going on in the district, but what I'm really proud to report is that our district is really leading the way and helping show other districts how this work might be done. So this is kind of like a big leap year for us. In a similar vein, we've also got an update on MyCap, or the My Career and Academic Planning, or our instructional learning plans, the individualized learning plans that we've come up with. They're working on grade-to-grade transition, putting the data in Aspen so that teachers don't have to do interest surveys at the beginning of the year. They already have data coming to them that they can look at. There's got a really nice family component where they can put information about their child, a portion for the student where they can talk about their interests, how they see their career development, and it will be a nice kind of link to what we're doing with Naviance as well. So there's a lot of really great data to give us a more well-rounded picture. And then two final items. We are in the process of submitting for an Innovations Pathway Grant. It's a grant designed to connect school districts with community partners, business partners, so that way we're developing school-to-career pipelines. College credits could be earned as part of this process, and we're counting on our current relationship with Sensata, BCC, of course, and the school-to-career program that we're hopeful. Have we heard yet?
We were supposed to hear last Friday, and they postponed it until this Friday.
Well, we made such a compelling case that they're going to have a hard time. And then finally, speaking of Mr. Geddes, his hard work on the out-of-district survey. We're in the process of sending out a postcard with a specially designed survey for out-of-district families. The QR code, just asking them to give us some feedback on, why they've decided to make the choice to send their child to another school, and hopefully we can take that piece of data to include in our planning to hopefully bring more of the community back into the fold. So that completes my report, Mr. Chairman, because we're already past kickoff.
Just as a very quick note, Ms. Regan does have a draft of the postcard that she will be emailing to all of us tomorrow, so you can take a look at it and see how it's set up. There were some slight changes from when we had initially sent the committee a draft, because in talking with IT, it made more sense to separate out the folks that currently send their families out of a district and the families that used to send their students out of district. So again, those are going to be two separate surveys. So she'll be sending the postcard out to all of us tomorrow, and they should go out sometime soon. So thank you to Ms. Regan and Mr. Plurd in OIT for putting all of their work into it.
Great, thank you. Is that all?
That's it.
Next, we have open forum. Anyone here who would like to address the committee at open forum? All right, that will close open forum. Does anyone else have any business before the committee, Mr. Domenici?
Just a small reminder that the Attleboro Youth Commission is sponsoring Spooky Maboo at Willett High School this coming Saturday afternoon. Willett Elementary, not Willett High. See, all this grade span is getting me shifted around. That's where we're going. Willett Elementary, this Saturday, the 26th. I believe the start time is, I want to say it's around 12 noon. Lots of fun, and all the kids should come.
Anyone else? All right, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
decision? Reach a decision?
I think it got taken out of our hands.
There are a
Oh.
few things that
through wedding